Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis news from April 4th to the 10th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, but then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you choose to do so. And we're going to start with this news from Marijuana Moment, as Montana is on pace to generate more jobs and tax revenue than coal this year, advocates say. So I'm sure Montana is very happy that they've legalized adult use cannabis, as their medical and recreational sales are approaching ambitious projections from legalization supporters through the first quarter of 2022, the first year in which recreational dispensaries have been legally allowed to operate in the state, industry supporters say. The two halves of the cannabis sector have totaled $72.9 million in sales from January 1, the first day of the new cannabis policy environment, to the end of March, according to the Montana Department of Revenue, which posted updated sales data online this week. And so the adult use or recreational market saw its most robust month yet in March, with $15.9 million in sales compared to $13.5 in February and $14.1 million the month before, while recreational sales have consistently trounced sales on the medical side since the beginning of the year, and March was no different, as medical sales last month hit $9.9 million compared to $9.4 million the month before and $10.1 million in January. So as the months go on, good to see the numbers continue to go up. And just to add, as Peterson noted, that this also puts the cannabis market about on pace to raise the same amount, if not more money, for the state than coal severance taxes, which totaled around $43 million in 2021. As more jobs and more tax revenue will be generated by cannabis this year than coal. And that is amazing, he said. I do agree, so good job, Montana. Glad you took initiative and you're already seeing the benefits of ending prohibition. While we've got an update from Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham of New Mexico, who launched adult use on April 1st, and on opening weekend alone, recreational cannabis sales generated nearly $700,000 in tax revenue for the state and local communities. So happy to relay this, as they're seeing the benefits as well. By creating an exciting new industry, we're diversifying our state's economy and creating new jobs for New Mexicans. And I did see somewhere in a headline, so don't quote me on this, but apparently in their first week, the full 7 days, they've managed to do about $10 million in sales. So clearly New Mexico is setting a good trend for themselves, but just wanted to share that as they're seeing the benefits of ending prohibition. And so I wanted this one from MJ Stock Trader. Wanted to share this as it's a must watch. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen supporting safe banking during today's FSC Dems hearing. Rep Perlmutter keeping the pressure on. Literally everyone wants safe banking except Sen Schumer and Sen Booker, it seems. So people keep dying because of their stubbornness. It's true, that is the reality, and so hopefully they will provide the solution, which is safe banking, sooner than later. But just wanted to share this clip as it's quite informative and shows us where we sit right now.
Basically, from the Republicans' point of view, too big, too broad. Now Senator Brown is the chair of the committee, too limited, too narrow. But we know that people are still getting killed and robbed. And most recently, Seattle Times did an editorial last week because 3 people were killed in Seattle last week. A robber, a police officer, and an owner of a dispensary because of all the cash. Oakland, California, in November, there were 25 armed robberies in 1 week. And we had a young woman speak with us who was one of those who was robbed. And then she got robbed again last week.
Sad, man.
Small businesses, minority-owned businesses need access to capital.
They're the ones hit the hardest.
They would get if the banking system were open to them. So I was speaking to the national bank supervisors last week, and I said to them, you know, this isn't Ukraine. This issue isn't Ukraine. This issue isn't nuclear winter. This issue isn't climate change, but it's a real problem. And they said, yeah, you're sent there to solve problems, and they expect this problem to be solved. I'd like to just get your sentiment on this subject, since you and I have talked about it for a very long time.
We have talked about it for a very long time, and I agree with you. It's an important issue, and it's extremely frustrating one that we haven't been able to resolve it. I really appreciate your leadership in this area. We have worked with you on this bill. We're supportive of it. As you know, there's a conflict between state and national law. Banks are trapped in the middle of that, and some legislative solution, I think, is necessary
Yes.
to move this forward. I share your frustration that we haven't been able to make progress. I think it does really require congressional action.
And doing their
And
job.
I thank you for that, and I guess I just ask you to impress upon the administration the need to either get it passed as part of the American Competes Act, which I think will be coming up the quickest, so that nobody else dies because there's so much cash, or standalone, but get it out of the Senate and get it to the president. So
We would like to see that happen.
thank you very much.
So that does sound promising, right? So thank you, Ed, again, for not giving up and trying to put SAFE in any sort of legislation that we can pass it. And obviously, as we see, everyone seems to get it, except POTUS, Senate Majority Leader, and Booker, and obviously we know the reasons why. And so just wanted to share, as there is more support building over time, we'll get to that, but I also wanted to just share this article, Mindset Value, from Aaron Edelheit, writing the SAFE window. Could safe banking actually pass Congress in the next 90 days? Obviously, it could, but it also might not. So best to plan for the worst and expect to be pleasantly surprised at some point. But I wanted to share something within this that I did find that I thought was quite interesting. And so enter the Safe Banking Act, and just to touch on a bit of Perlmutter and his relationship with Nancy Pelosi. Now, I don't know much about this, but I did find this and just thought it was interesting because it could go deeper than what we see on the surface. It's Perlmutter who announced his plan to file an amendment in the Rules Committee shortly after the next of the negotiated defense bill was released early on Tuesday, said that he spoke with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi about pursuing other avenues to force the Senate to finally take up his legislation. And apparently, Pelosi owes Perlmutter from the past. There was a fierce divide among Democrats if she should be the Speaker of the House, and back in 2018, Perlmutter brokered a deal that enabled her to remain the Speaker of the House. So from my understanding, the source is here if you'd want to read it, and from the writer's point of view, Aaron's, I believe that his relationship with Pelosi is stronger than assumed by investors. And so, I mean, I obviously wasn't aware, and that is possible. So worth just considering this, as, you know, SAFE might have a better shot in America Competes than it did in the NDAA, with Pelosi's support as well. And then with that next bill is here, Enter America Competes. And so obviously we know that this is heading into the conference process. And so just wanted to share this. Now this article is below if you want to read more, but I'm going to jump over because I just wanted to share, as the support is growing for SAFE, we're hearing more organizations make more noise. As the American Bankers Association agrees with Washington State Treasurer that the Safe Banking Act would solve the urgent public safety matter resulting from the conflict between state and federal law when it comes to banking cannabis. We call on the Senate to pass this bipartisan legislation. So again, we keep hearing from the ABA, but obviously better to hear from them than to not hear from them at all. While on top of that, we also have this one from the National Credit Union Administration. So shout out to Champsy for sending me this. But the NCAU board member, Rodney E. Hood, and I've covered him in the past, and he's been an advocate for passing SAFE. He shares some remarks at the Emerging Market Coalition in Washington, D.C. And so this was as of April 7th, 2022. So there's a lot in here, but most of it is focused on indicators of progress towards safe banking. And so I think that's positive that he's willing to speak on this, but just the main thing to take away and to share with you all, just for some perspective, that once safe banking passes and the flip switches, because consider this. Now, the good news is that the number of financial institutions working with cannabis-related businesses has in fact grown, if slowly. But let's put those numbers into context. As my agency, the NCUA, regulates and insures the nation's credit unions, which includes almost 5,000 institutions of credit unions. Yet, only 202 of those 5,000 as of right now, are providing services to one of the fastest growing industries in the nation. And so thank you, Rodney E. Hood, for admitting that this is one of the fastest growing industries in the nation. And that is why, to consider only 202 of the 5,000 are working with them. Just imagine once we get this discrepancy figured out and how much growth potential can be unlocked just from, 400 to 600 to thousands of credit unions. And so lastly, just to add, I'm not satisfied with that, nor should you be. So thank you, Rodney Hood, for, putting your personality into this and sharing your frustration. And that's why I'm pleased that you all are hosting this event here in Washington today, because what we need is ongoing communication between industry leaders, regulators, and other stakeholders to keep the momentum going. So I just appreciate his effort as well, because obviously he doesn't have to be speaking out on the Safe Banking Act, but he is. And so this is more pressure adding into trying to get SAFE passed now. And so this brings us to where we are today. As from my understanding, Schumer tweeted this: the Senate is moving an important step closer to delivering a robust jobs and competitiveness bill that will help fix our supply chains and boost American innovation for a generation. And so in here, it shares which members of Congress will be in the conference process. And so then Brady Cobb tweeted, remember, SAFE is in the House version already. Right, so do remember SAFE is in there, and so wanted to thank Santiago Dunbar for making this nice and easy summary. Breakdown from the Senate side. Apparently 26 Senate members were chosen for conference, 9 are co-sponsors of SAFE banking, and obviously I'd mentioned all of this as a potential reason why SAFE might pass in the NDAA in December as well, and while it didn't pass then because Schumer was more adamant to pull it out and go with his own plan, obviously time has passed and the solution has become more dire, and so obviously there's every incentive for Schumer to keep it in this bill, but obviously it's better to have more sponsors of SAFE banking and more members from the Senate who happen to represent cannabis-friendly states, whether they have medical or adult use, than not, right? And so I'll just continue. 9 are co-sponsors of SAFE banking, not including co-sponsors. 10 represent states with some form of medical cannabis, which is good for us, and then 1 represents an adult use state. And so composition would seem supportive of SAFE with the caveat of a few hardline Republican prohibitionists, but as of that, from now until next week, conference process will begin, and we just have to, again, hope for the best. So for your own situation, plan accordingly, expect the worst, or plan for the worst, and then expect to be pleasantly surprised at some point. But remember, safe passing is a matter of when, not if, so as long as you can be patient, you will likely be rewarded. And so on to this one, some more news from marijuana moment, as states collected more than $3.7 billion in recreational cannabis tax revenue in 2021, a report finds. So that's a 34% increase compared to revenue that states received from cannabis sales in 2020. The report follows up on an analysis MPP put out in January that looked at the total adult use cannabis tax revenue collected by all legal states since recreational sales started in Colorado and Washington state in 2014. At the same time, the 2021 figures were incomplete, but still showed that states received more than $10 billion in tax dollars from recreational cannabis sales over the past 7 years. And now that the data is updated for 2021, the organization says the 2014 to 2022 total as of March is $11.2 billion. Nothing short of impressive, and obviously all the states that took initiative and ended prohibition sooner than later are benefiting. And so we have the breakdown of the 2021 recreational cannabis tax revenue for each adult use state, and so we can see that here. And then here are the year-by-year figures for all adult use cannabis sales tax revenue combined. So it's the same figure that I think we saw in the charts previously, but obviously as more states also reform, the total addressable market just organically expands, and that allows for more tax revenue to be brought in. So thank you, Marijuana Policy Project, for updating this data and letting us know that obviously the states that ended prohibition are way ahead of those that haven't. And on to this one from Marijuana Moment, as cannabis legalization tied to a significant decrease in foster care placements, new study finds. So again, more reason to just end cannabis prohibition all in all, as legalizing cannabis for adult use is associated with at least a 10% decrease in foster care admissions on average, according to a new study, including reductions in placements due to physical abuse, neglect, parental incarceration, and misuse of alcohol and other drugs. Yeah, and it turns out if a parent uses cannabis in the evening, like a parent might drink a glass of wine or a glass of beer, there's no reason to try and put them in jail. That's obviously much worse for the child's development than to allow the parent to keep doing their job as a parent, right? And further, if cannabis was legalized nationally, it would result in hundreds of millions of dollars in estimated cost savings for foster care systems every year. While researchers at the University of Mississippi analyzed data from several sources using a difference in differences designed to compare trends in foster care systems in states that have legalized cannabis with those in non-legal states. And on top of the 10% decrease in total admissions for foster care, the study published in the journal Economic Inquiry also looks at the potential economic impact of those average decreases. And based on earlier research that found a single foster care placement costs an average of $25,000, the new study determined that nationwide legalization would reduce the financial burden of the foster care system by about $675 million annually. So right there you have it. Ending prohibition speaks for itself, and it would just be great if all of the U.S. can get on track with the legal states that are doing it. But on to some other tweets. Wanted to share this one from Todd Harrison. So this is from BTIG on U.S. cannabis, I think after their global cannabis conference. And so you can pause to read, but they go through quite a bit here as the recent fireside chats reinforce our optimism regarding cannabis banking legislation this year. So that's good to hear. And so they touched a little bit on just Rep. Mace's comprehensive cannabis proposal, warrants watching given evolving conversations and expected shift in House control, while they remain bullish on the prospects of cannabis banking legislation in the second half of 2022, and a little bit more on what's next. So you can pause to read, otherwise you can grab the link below if it's too small. We've also got another one from Jeffries on U.S. cannabis, so I wanted to share this one. So thank you, Todd, for sharing so I can relay it. And so obviously cannabis reform, noise building again, and you can pause to read if you'd like to do so. And then as well, this is from Jeffries on Cannabis. Pause to read if you wish to do so. Otherwise, links will be below. Well, we got this one from Todd sharing that a new New York bill would require big cannabis companies to invest in communities. And I just find this ironic because it's not like the MSOs aren't the ones leading the charge in doing this already, because we know in legal states, MSOs are helping expunge records and they do have social equity funds or are reinvesting in the communities that they do work in. So, but just to add from a law360.com article, as a New York Democrat, state lawmaker will unveil a bill requiring large multi-state cannabis companies to invest in communities disproportionately harmed by prohibition. So again, they're already doing that, so I kind of hope this bill doesn't pass. And it's not like the US MSOs were the ones that caused the war on drugs, right? It was the government's policies that they implemented that didn't work for a long time, and while they should have realized that they didn't work, they just chose to leave them in place. And so while this is a nice effort to try and make it look like you're forcing, the businesses benefiting from this to give back, it'd be great if the government would pick up some slack where they really dropped the ball in the past. While we do have this one from New York as well on U.S. cannabis, but this one's about 280E. So thanks, Todd, for sharing. As New York cannabis companies get a new tax break from the state budget. As this was announced, New York's cannabis producers and distributors are poised to get a tax break from the multi-million-dollar state budget that would give them an edge over cannabis companies in other states. And the language was included in one of the 10 bills unveiled Thursday as New York Governor Kathy Hochul tries to forge a budget deal with Democratic legislative leaders. And the fiscal 2023 budget is now 7 days past its April 1 due date, so they got to get this done. But the best part is the proposal would let New York state companies book a deduction for amounts that are disallowed under the federal 280E provision. It could be a boon for companies based in New York that already have medical licenses like Curaleaf Holdings, Green Thumb Industries, Cresco Labs Inc., and Columbia Care. And so this is big news, and hopefully this will end up passing, but it's great to see other states. We saw Pennsylvania taking initiative, Missouri, and now one of the big ones, New York. And so state lawmakers are expected to pass the bill, which was agreed upon by leadership later Thursday. The tax break would apply to taxable years beginning on and after January 1st, 2022. So it seems like this would apply going forward, which is great news for the companies listed here that already have a presence in New York. Well, this one from Todd Harrison, State Senate passes a sweeping social equity cannabis bill. So this one comes out of Massachusetts, another social equity experiment, and all we can really do is see over time how this ends up working out. So state senators passed a sweeping social equity cannabis bill, which would create a fund to support equal rights in the cannabis industry. And while this sounds good, it's also very important to just determine the difference between what equity is and what equal access to opportunity is, because I think everyone in their right mind wants anyone who is harmed by the war on drugs to get equal access to opportunity. However, when we use the word equity, well, I have learned this recently, but do feel free to challenge me in the comments because I could be wrong. But from my understanding, equity in this context, business-wise, is a critical theory buzzword that does not mean equal access to opportunity, but basically whoever makes the decisions is allowed to discriminate based on what they believe is fair. And if that sounds a bit crazy, think about what we saw in New Jersey. Basically, New Jersey awarded licenses just simply based on skin color, and then they called it a day after all the delays we saw. And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't give those harmed by the war on drugs first dibs at getting equal access to opportunity in this industry. All I'm saying is that if it turns out social equity isn't actually giving equal access to opportunity, that might make a bit more sense as to why all these states that are so social equity driven and making such an effort to vocally express that they want to give back to those harmed by the war on drugs, it would just make a bit more sense as to why they've said all that, but their actions have pretty much done everything in their power to delay anyone in the state and anyone in the industry from actually getting a head start. And so anyways, good luck, Massachusetts. Hopefully you can make this a good program, but I'm just starting to question this over time because we're not seeing the equal access to opportunity that we might have been promised or that we might have thought. But onto this one, Unusual Whales wanted to share as apparently Booker has chimed in and he aims for the 420 to drop the new weed bill. And while we did recently hear that Schumer was hoping to file it by the end of April, it is just nice to hear Booker chime in that they're still aiming for 420. And while the Senate is out of session from April 8th to the 25th, it's still possible that Schumer, Booker, and Wyden can get together and still officially file the bill on 420. And we've waited long enough, and so hopefully they do get to that sooner than later. We just wanted to provide this update as this is closer to 420 than what Schumer had told us last week. Well, I wanted to share this note from Jason G. Wild, who is the executive chairman of TerrAscend Corp. And so most of the notes here are just about TerrAscend, but it does tell you a little bit about New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Michigan, which obviously TerrAscend is in, and other MSOs are in there as well. I just wanted to share this as these are their notes from a conference, I believe, where Jason G. Wild was speaking, and he did share that we were told the 30-day waiting period doesn't apply to TerrAscend, and we could start very quickly post-vote on Monday, thanks official New Jersey launch last week of April. So that is great news, and just to clarify though, he does tweet that we were told that the 30-day wait period wouldn't apply to any of the alternative treatment centers. It's not just that it doesn't apply to TerrAscend, but but also it wouldn't apply to any of the other alternative treatment centers, likely Curaleaf or Verano, that have assured the CRC that they have enough supply to meet the demand. And so just wanted to share this last snippet. Is this your estimate expectation for New Jersey to get approved on April 11th, or is this more the CRC? And Jason Wall just says, our relationship with the CRC is excellent. I don't think they would call for the special meeting for nothing. The agenda for the meeting came out last night. We feel really strongly about it, but that said, we can only control what we can control. So obviously they're anticipating that they will get approved for that. And so there's more information here just about TerrAscend and what they're doing in specific markets if you want to read. But keep your eyes peeled for Monday, because we will find out from the CRC whether or not New Jersey officially does launch adult use. And so on to some news from the MSOs, as Curaleaf has announced that they will report their first quarter 2022 financial and operational results on May 9th. So we have Green Thumb reporting earlier in May, and then we've got Curaleaf coming on May 9th. So good to see other MSOs already ready to report their first quarter 2021 results, and this will be 5 p.m. post-market on the afternoon in Monday. And so wanted to share this one from Curaleaf International. A new poll shows European market is ready for legal recreational cannabis. And so let's find out what they figured out. The polling data published by Hanway Associates revealed that there is a majority support across Europe for legal, government-regulated sales of cannabis products to adults over the age of 18 years old. Overall, of the 9,043 adults surveyed, 55% supported legal recreational cannabis, 20% were indifferent, and the remainder 25% were opposed. Of particular importance to Europeans was companies' adherence to the highest standard of service and regulation in their approach to legal recreational cannabis, which is why a regulated retail offering is the least controversial opinion among supporters of legal recreational cannabis, with 81% in favor versus social clubs that has 56% support and homegrown with 62% support. Of all the respondents in the poll, 48% support regulated retail stores, 35 support homegrown, and 32 support social clubs, while homegrown has the strongest opposition with 41% against among all respondents, and these findings indicate promising commercial opportunities for stores and highly regulated products. And so there's more information from those involved in the survey, but you can grab a link below. Nonetheless, though, this is good to highlight that the demand is there in Europe, as that will likely be the next chapter once the US finally gets going. So on to some states. This one comes from the Office of Medical Cannabis Use in Florida. For this past week, we can see from April 4th to the 8th, one dispensary was opened in Daytona Beach, and this is from HT Medical Cannabis. Unfortunately, I do not know the company behind them, but if we take a look at the qualified patient count, we can see that the qualified patient count increased to 705,169, which represents a week-over-week increase of 3,088 patients. So good to see that growth continue, and as strong again week over week. Well, if we look at the dispensations from April 1st to the 7th, we can see the sales definitely slowed down from the end of the month, but nonetheless, strong sales across the board. And we can check to see every MSO in the state, how many milligrams of THC they sold, how many milligrams of CBD they sold, and how many ounces of smokable flower. And so if you're invested in any MSO that operates in Florida, you can check week over week whether they're selling more or less, gaining market share or losing market share in this very competitive state. So on to some state news. Got this one from Santiago Dunbar. So thank you, Santiago, for sharing this one. As if a bill legalizing medical cannabis doesn't reach his desk, Governor Andy Beshear says he's ready to consider taking action himself to give some ailing Kentuckians access to medical cannabis. And this wouldn't be that newsworthy if it wasn't referring to Kentucky, a state that basically needs Mitch McConnell's approval for anything. And so again, while it's still early on and this is far from actually being passed, it is just good to hear that the governor is supporting, obviously, getting medical cannabis for those that need it in Kentucky, despite what Mitch McConnell might think. And that would require Mitch to allow that to happen, and that would be the best possible thing for everyone in Kentucky. Well, we've got this news from Kim Rivers, so thank you, Kim, for sharing this, as we have more governors easing their stance towards the plant, this time from Maryland, as the Maryland governor lets a bill to implement cannabis legalization take effect without his signature. And so we know that the question will be on the 2022 ballot, and we know those from Maryland are likely going to vote an overwhelming yes. And so hopefully this state can get that adult use program launched sooner than later once they get that approved. Well, I wanted to share this one from Pennsylvania, as this is another state, and we do see Republican lawmakers taking initiative, and this is another article highlighting it's time to legalize adult use cannabis in PA, says GOP Senator, I forget his name, Mike Regan, I believe, but just to quote from the article, our choices are between safe or unsafe, tested or untested, age-controlled or available to all, and tax revenue or criminal gain. A choice between the status quo and a regulated market is so obvious. It is hard to imagine who disagrees. And at this point, this is why everyone ought to be for ending prohibition and reforming their laws sooner than later. Well, unfortunately, it's not all good news. I wanted to share this one from Todd, as apparently the Georgia Medical Cannabis Production Bill falls one vote short. So sadly, no relief for patients in the stalled cannabis oil program, which is very sad. So my heart goes out to anyone in Georgia that needs access to medical cannabis, because sadly, the incompetence from your lawmakers, all it does is force you to continue to turn to the black market and put yourself at risk. So it's very sad. Hopefully Georgia can get through this roadblock and get something passed for those in their state sooner than later. Well, I wanted to share this one. It's an article that MJ Investor 420 shared, as this court case can have widespread impact on social equity programs in each state, as it seems like someone has made the constitutional challenge to the Illinois cannabis licensing debacle that they're going through. It argues that out-of-state applicants were illegally discriminated against in favor of in-state residents in Illinois when applying for social equity licenses. But doesn't that make sense? Wouldn't you want to choose residents from Illinois before you choose out-of-state residents? And so it's very interesting, but just happy to at least share that there's some sort of an update, and we might see this come to a solution sooner than later, mostly because it's being taken to the next level from this constitutional challenge. And it's been 2 years that this has still been stuck, and we haven't seen any of these social equity licenses handed out in Illinois. So all we can hope is that they come to a solution sooner than later. But if you wanted to learn more, you can grab that article in the link below. And so lastly, a few articles, as the DEA says cannabis seeds are considered legal hemp as long as they don't exceed the THC limit, which is good news. The DEA recently carried out a review of federal statute and implementing regulations in response to an inquiry from attorney Shane Pennington regarding the legality of cannabis seeds, tissue culture, and other genetic material containing no more than 0.3% THC. While the agency affirmed that while it used to be the case that cannabis seeds were controlled, full stop, completely illegal, that's no longer the case because of the federal legalization of hemp, as Pennington discussed in an edition of his On Drugs newsletter on Substack on Monday. And so with that, I just want to ask you a question. Did you know that the healthiest seed in the entire seed kingdom is the hemp seed? Can you imagine that? And so I just want to share you this snippet from the original series I did when I started my channel back in the day, from Reality Check Cannabis in 2020, because this might tell you something that you didn't know. And I just have to ask you a question once we get to the end of it. And of all vegetable oils, hemp seed oil has the lowest saturated fats, bad fats, at 8% of total volume, and the highest in total essential fatty acids, good acids like omega, at 80% total oil volume. These essential fatty acids hemp seed oil is filled with are responsible for activating our immune cells. So why is the plant kingdom's richest seed still illegal to harvest yourself? To keep people sick? So next time you hear any government pushing some policy in the name of public health, it's easier to think of that as something that they want to control that isn't going to benefit the rest of the population at large. But thankfully, we are so closer than ever to the end of prohibition, and I do think once we freed this plant, a whole lot of other domino effects are going to happen. Well, lastly, The Guardian shares that Thailand dreams of a high-end cannabis tourism after cannabis is legalized, which they are in the process of doing. So I wanted to share some info, as Thailand's narcotics board announced in January it would delist cannabis that has a tetrahydrocannabinol level of below 0.2%, essentially hemp, making it the first Asian country to do so. And Thailand is also the first in Southeast Asia to sanction medical use of cannabis in 2018. Well, Anutin Charnvirakul, the public health minister, said that once the delisting comes into effect, 120 days after publication on the Royal Thai Government Gazette website, people will be able to grow cannabis plants at home after notifying their local government. It will also be possible to obtain licenses for commercial growth, and a draft cannabis and hemp bill has been submitted to Parliament detailing how to govern recreational use and growth. But rather than a stoner paradise, Lin envisages cannabis being folded into the medical and well-being industry, attracting Silicon Valley types, big spenders, as they travel for corporate trips. So that's an interesting take and very different from what Thailand's likely seen in the past, as it has been a stoner paradise. But just to share some more info, as in 2019, 39.9 million tourists visited Thailand. And I've been there 3 times. I love the country. It's estimated that 27.7 million will visit purely for the purpose of health and wellness in 2022, putting expenditure on health and wellness tourism at 2.5 billion. While the country's recreational cannabis market has the potential to be worth 424 million by 2024, according to cannabis research firm Prohibition Partners. And so obviously this could provide that spark. And so it's just good to see some countries taking initiative, as once the US, officially deschedules it, we'll see the globe follow behind. And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update in the world of cannabis. Have a great weekend, everybody.